Good day, everyone, and welcome back into the studio for another day and another paint sesh. So today I worked a little bit more on this cute little fairy. So I advanced the saturation and the contrast and the overall detail in drawing. This is not the final painting. There is definitely going to be one more class at least of this, probably another hour to 2 hours of painting to nail this one, but I'm happy with how it's going so far, and I hope you're enjoying following along. So enjoy the ride and get out your paintbrushes and join me for this awesome little painting. And I forgot to mention, I have uploaded the sketches to my Patreon, so if you want to follow along with the actual sketches of the little fairy, they are available for download on there. So thank you guys for being here, and I can't wait to get painting. Watercolors get a lot lighter when they dry, so I find I end up having to build up my values quite a bit in the process, especially when I'm doing this really detailed work. If ever you put too much color down, you can just take your brush and just kind of wipe away. Like if I want to create a little bit more variation in some of these, I can just kind of take my brush with a bit of water and dab it, and it will bring some of that paper color back. I'm going to move this over here. It seems to be where I want to stick my brush. So if you want to create interesting washes, you can just dampen your paper, and even if you just take some pigments straight out of the tube or whatever, out of your pan, you can allow them to just kind of blend together with the water on the paper, and just sort of let things bleed together, and it will create interesting washes for you when that settles. So sometimes I'll do that. I'll just dampen my paper. I usually use a color to see where the water's going, just very, very light, and then I will go in after and allow the paint to sort of do its thing. One of the reasons why I do add color into my paint to dampen the paper is just so I see where it's going, because some of these edges here have bled, and I'm getting weird edges, but I want this hair to sit on top, so I'm just going to go back in here and kind of tidy that up after. So what happened was there was some water over the hair when I did the wings. It was a bit damp, so the water sort of transferred over, and it's okay, you just have to be aware that it will do that. You can mostly control it just by controlling where your water goes, by having a little bit of color in there, like this, as you dampen your paper, so that you can see exactly where the water goes. But if you do mess up, there is a fair amount of room to just remove that after. Just gonna add some shadowing in there. So I think I just want to go in now and kind of start detailing my things out. Just a little bit. I don't want to add the fine detail, but I want to make sure that all of my values are working for me, and I'm going to start integrating some details into that. So I'm watching some light, so the top of her head is receiving light. So I'm going to add those little edges and then take some water on my brush and kind of soften between there and just leave some spaces just to get something interesting. And then, like I said, I can take some of this paint color and dip it into the part that's curving under or is under something to create that depth. There's going to be shadows in here, a lot of shadows. So underneath these little twigs and grasses, I can go quite dark. So I'm going to take my moon glow, because it has purple in it, and then my yellow brown, the burnt umber, because they are complementary, and this will create a nice desaturated dark shade for me. Drop this in. That's very dark, but I can dab it away in a minute. And here I am kind of paying attention a little bit to my drawing. I do want there to be enough contrast in this to be interesting, but because I'm kind of doing a vintage style, I do want it to stay a little bit light and faded looking. Just really soft. So I'm going to take my handy little paper towel and just gently dab it, and it sort of softens it all. It creates some texture in there that's a little bit random. Just soften this edge a little bit, and I'll go back in later with some sort of white product. As I mentioned, I haven't decided yet, but I will bring some hairs in front of her face and really kind of soften out this edge. But right now I want to make sure I'm getting enough contrast to really help the volumes. And as paint and water kind of come off my brush from this, I'll start using it more like a slightly dry brush technique with less pigment in it, because it gives me some different interesting values and colors and saturations on here. So I can kind of create some subtle soft line work this way. There we go. This is sort of getting more into the level of saturation and contrast that I want. And I'm just using right now a damp brush with a small amount of pigment on a dry paper. It is a really, really gentle hand. Alright, so I want to do the back of the hair here. I'm going to add a little bit of just this brown, and actually maybe a little bit of Naples yellow. That was yellow apparently. Naples yellow and white, and maybe even a touch of blue for those highlights. And I'm going to go nice and light. Kind of that golden highlights of her light brown hair, sandy brown hair in the sun. Here I'm going to cool it off a little bit with a touch more blue. It sort of tilts to green because I'm adding like yellows and blues together. So obviously that makes a green. However, I do kind of want this to look very earthy. So I'm kind of letting shadows and things turn a bit green on this one. Otherwise you could just add a less saturated blue color if you're trying to create shadows with a yellow brown. Actually ultramarine blue is a really good one for that when it comes to burnt umber, because the purples in the blue actually also cancel out the yellows in the brown. So they work really well together to create like a desaturated black color. Add some more color in here. There we go. So at this point I'm just sort of upping value and saturation of the overall image. And then here where her hair comes across her body, I think I'm going to add a little bit of shadowing under it. Just to help sort of separate that a little bit. And then I'll go back over again with something light or white colored, just to add some more variation. But we're going to need to go dark enough on her skin tone to see that. So if you're trying to put something light over something that's like, put a white highlight over something that's already light, you're not going to see it. You need to have enough value contrast. Add some of the hairs kind of coming in through here. Add some light yellow. And then I'll take some more of this brown black, and I'm going to start adding a bit more shadow up into here. I'm trying to create sort of the illusion of some very loose curls. Let's get some movement through here. And I'm going to go a little bit more pink on that cheek. I'm just going to grab some that's on this paper here, because I know it's going to be very light. Add a little bit more rosiness. And I'm going to add a little bit more to the lips, although it's not the shadowing. Again, it's just trying to reach a more saturated highlight color. And then I'll go in with the shadowing after. She definitely needs more overall color here. Okay, so these leaves, I'm going to start tackling these again. I'm going to take a smaller brush. Let's see. I grabbed a couple extras. I've got a Simply Simmons. This is more of a detailer or like rigger brush. It's 10-0. And then I've also got here a Dynasty from Thailand. They're actually quite nice too, and it's just quite small. It's a 000. I also like the Nobel brushes. So actually, let me see. These are kind of cool. I'm just going to show you some brush strokes of these, the differences. So with the riggers, you can take them and do really thin lines, but then you can also press and release and get really, really cool and interesting shapes. So see how that makes like a nice leaf shape already? Super awesome. Just a few little brush strokes. And then for the other brushes that are not detailers but they're quite thin, I actually use these more just for really fine, really fine drawing. And again, you can sort of do the same thing, but because they're smaller and the body is smaller, I get sort of just finer details with those. So I'm going to take some, actually, we're going to take the bigger brush first, I guess. And I just want to add, again, some overall lighting. Oops, that's a lot of green. It's very moist right now, so it's coming off really easily. And I'm gonna sort of make it a little bit more bluish, as though there's like blue skylight hitting it, but that's a little bit saturated, so I'm gonna add a tiny bit of Payne's Gray and a bit of Moon's Glow in here, and just kind of like mix into these so I get an interesting color. I know that I'm sort of trying to make mud right now, but I am trying to paint a sort of desaturated painting. When we do the fairy and we do the squirrel, we're going to go for more vibrant, saturated color. Oh, and here I am painting detail, and that's not what I'm supposed to do. I want to create first some shadows. Oh, and I actually think I'm going to take some yellow ochre, because this is going to turn a little bit more brownish yellow, so that I can get some sort of like more dried leaves. So this one under here, I think I'll go a little bit more like dried leaf look, because it's going to help recede into her hair too if the colors are more similar. So let's already give this some volume by pushing it back by just making it darker, like overall. And then I'm going to take some of the brown and Moon Glow that's in her hair. And I'm going to just touch it into here because it's still damp. And just allow some washes to happen and shadowing. So I can't paint that right now because it's still wet, so I'm going to sort of move up into here, and let's say also maybe this little leaf back in here is also behind. So this is where I start trying to pull out just some dimensions by changing color, saturation, and value. And I think I'll just go into this part of this one a little bit, but just less of it, just sort of into that center. And I'll do another little bit up here. And then I've got all these little twigs and things, so I'm just going to take some of my brown, black, that touched in there. I don't care, it looks kind of cool. I'm just going to let it do its thing. This is where I can press and then release to get more interesting line work on here. I always feel like fairies sort of hide themselves by camouflaging with like sticks and leaves and things. So when you're looking at them, it's more like you just see a pile of leaves and sticks. But if you look really closely, you can see a little fairy in there. So I always like to draw them sort of in their camouflage. And also just making out these little stories in your head while you're doing this is so much fun. I don't want to overpaint all of this. I want to keep some variation in all of there to give some depth. So, but I am starting to, as you see, sort of define some more of these shapes with these smaller brushes and sort of bring life to some of those areas. That was way too dark. I wanted a lighter detail there, so I'm just going to dab that away. And go back in, maybe with some more Naples yellow. It'll just bring it closer to the hair color because there's a lot of Naples yellow in that hair. There we go. And then I can take this detailer brush and just start gently pulling some of the strands out from the shadows, giving a little bit more movement to her hair here. I'm trying to imagine the direction that the hair is sort of like flowing around her head and also around each of the individual strands. Like, where do they cross over and where do they kind of get messy together, and then where do they fall straighter? Kind of starting to detail. This is sort of the fun part. And I do continue paying attention to my overall values and my overall lighting structure, but I do it now more in the detail level. So I always kind of work them overall washes in color, overall values, and then into detail. Do her little eyebrows. So I think I'll start tackling her face a little bit because I'm finding it is just not defined enough. I don't want too dark of an eyebrow here. But this will help to ground her, the top of her orbital bone here. This is tricky. This is where I want to zoom in because I'm used to digitally painting things and I can't. I spend quite a bit of time in a digital painting environment. It has actually really helped my traditional media artwork. Please don't believe that digital art is not real art. That is not true. It takes a lot of skill. It's just another tool like everything else. But you do develop some habits where you can zoom in to do tight detail on a very small area, which you can't do on watercolor. Alright, so this little pupil, first of all, I'm going to tackle this little edge here where her eyelashes go. A little bit more water on this. I'm staying very light with the amount of paint that I have done. And I don't want that to be like a solid line because that will stylize. I need it to be darker in some areas and lighter in others. And then there's this other little line that comes around in the upper lid. And then the shadow works its way up from here. And I can use more of the body of the brush to get this. And I still need to decide how dark I want to go on this. There we go, she's starting to look like something. This eye is much more in shadow generally, so I'm going to have to bring that sort of into being. Right now it's much lighter and it just looks really weird, but we can fix this. And I need to do some I'm actually going to warm it a little bit. Very, very, very subtle line under her eye. A bit more here. But it needs to be really, really, really light and delicate. I can't have this as an outline or it will not read as having a dimension. There we go. And I'm going to take a little bit of this up. And we're remembering that this is a ball, so we want to shadow it as though it's a round shape. And then I'm going to pull some of this up with just some water because it's too intense right now. I don't want a hard edge on this. But now we're starting to see her eye. Alright, so a little bit more red. Go for that blue-red color and some browns. And maybe just a little bit of Payne's gray to cool it into a shadow. Not that dark. Dab some of it away, add a little bit more water. It's very subtle often, especially on faces. They're very soft and subtle. Especially for young people. Young people have very subtle faces. So I'm sort of doing that under, between where the lips sort of meet and go darker. And then there's always like a curve. And then there's that little cupid's bow. And then there's like a little bit of a line in here. And I'll have to go darker on this still, but we're getting somewhere. And under her chin, I'm going to add a little bit more Payne's gray, and I can mix it with this lip color, but I need it to be much cooler because I really want to bring the volume in her lips by using this shadow here. This is where basically the little pout of her lips creates a direct shadow under her chin, where her chin kind of folds under and then it comes back out. It's such a small area. I'll take some of this color here and just drag it around and just sort of then pull this out to soften this up. And I'll grab a little bit more of this. There's that little bit of flesh that comes over the mouth here. And there's usually a bunch of just little shadows and things that happen where this curves under towards her chin. I'm going to soften this a little bit. It's too bright. And darken a little bit under the chin here. It comes around, there's going to be sort of a shadow under here, but then there's a little bit of bounce light coming up. And as I mentioned, this other eye over here is in shadow, so I'm actually going to just take a little bit of my colors here very lightly. And shadow into this side. I'll fix that pupil in a minute. Now onto this side of the face, so that nose is going to be casting some shadow on here. I put a really dark one in right now, but I can soften it just by adding a bit of water and then sort of working into that lighter area. And under her nose here too, I can go quite a bit darker. That Payne's gray and that warmer mix. Just to give a little bit more nostril here. And the pupil, I can add a little white dot later for the lighting in here with some acrylic paint, just some titanium white or some gesso even. Gesso is actually a matte finish, so it works kind of well because it almost just looks like, if you don't go too thick with it, it almost just looks like a paper. So it's kind of tricky and clever. I find when the eyes start going in, things start taking shape. So this is an eyeball, which is round. So I'm going to take some of this Payne's gray and even some of this pink, just to keep it a bit, because there is sort of like lead color and stuff in eyeballs. And I am just going to add a bit of shadow. I'll keep some whiter around her eye, like around her eyeball, and I'm going to keep it light on the top of her lid there. It's really small. And then I'm going to paint this part of her eyeball, which is curved under there, but leave the light of the top of her bottom lid there. So sometimes you can create something to look light by just shadowing around it. And that's a little bit too much here, so I'm just going to dab that away. Whoops, I dabbed it all away. It's okay, I'm just going to add this back in. Now the paper's a bit damp anyway, so it'll soften my edge. That's better. I might have to go back in, but that's looking a lot better. And I'm going to come back here, now that this is a bit dry, add a little bit more red. That was way too much red. And Payne's gray. I think I'll let that sit, and then I'm going to shadow around it with the rest. A little bit of a hair there, really gentle. She's starting to look like something. Okay, now that these leaves are dry, I can go back in and just add some detail here, but I want to, because I needed to wait for this to do my other colors to create my depth. So I'm just going to take some brighter green with blue instead of that yellow, and sort of make some of these a bit darker, but a little bit more saturated and a different color than the ones underneath. And this one also, I'm going to do some, let's see, I'm going to go greener on this one, a little bit brighter. Just want to get some color variation happening in these washes, just by mixing in some colors that are interesting together. Watching this edge, I might dab it just to dry the paper here. And I'm going to go fairly light on this color. I'll just pull it across, and I might just leave that little edge a little bit just to get nice overlap. Also, I don't want them to blend. And let's see, we've got a nice big leaf sort of shape over here. Again, I'm going to add some yellow ochre to this to give me that warmer, a little bit of Payne spray to desaturate, sort of a warmer dead leaf color. I might put this one here. And I might do the same on this one. And I'm going to shadow in towards where this comes underneath. And let those washes do their thing. This is starting to look like something. I'll darken this a little bit. I'm not getting enough, it's not pushing back far enough. And I'm going to take this brighter green. I might keep it warm actually. You know what color I want to use? You don't have to use this color if you don't have it, but I love it. It's the Apatite green from Daniel Smith, the Genuine Apatite. It is also like a super granulator with different colors in it, so I don't know, I think it could be a cool, sort of bright, warm green that will have some interesting color shifts in it. And you know what, I think I might make some of these little pieces sort of greenish, so we can understand that they're not her hair necessarily. But that's a little bit too much, so I'm just going to dab away, and it leaves some a little bit of color, but not too much. Okay, so for the hair, I do not like what happens here. There's a hard edge here. Do not like it, so I am going to add some of this color and just pretend that I intentionally wanted a leaf here. And I'm going to add a little bit more of this color and a bit of brown maybe. Bring it closer to her hair color, but oops, that's too much, but still keeping into like a leafy green. Sometimes when you mess up something, it actually creates some interesting opportunities. And you know what, I think I'll just add another little one here. I think what happens when people paint is they maybe don't know the way forward from where they're at, and things don't really look like much until you're partway through the process, or actually a fair way through the process. And so I think it's a matter of people kind of get frustrated because they don't know where to go next, and then kind of stop. But if I had have stopped when it was not looking good about an hour ago, then I would never think that I'm able to like accomplish more with my painting, if you know what I mean. So I really like to just allow the process to happen and just allow the painting to go through these kind of ugly, awkward phases. Because I know that in the end, just with a little bit more work and patience and thought process, I can bring this to be something interesting. And I'm always thinking about how my colors are working together, how my depth is reading. So the lighting and the value and saturation of colors, the temperature of the colors, how are they working together, balancing light, dark, to help my shapes read. So this, we really see her face because it's very light on a very dark. So that helps to bring contrast and visibility and clarity. So these are just things that I'm constantly kind of analyzing and asking myself, and that's what gives me the roadmap forward so that I can bring these paintings to something that are visually interesting instead of sort of just getting a bit frustrated and stopping too early, because often you actually have a fairly good painting on your hands. You maybe just don't know it yet. And I go through this all the time. I get very frustrated with my work sometimes in certain points of the painting process, but I know I just have to keep analyzing and just keep moving forward. Painting is quite a humbling process, but it's also a very relaxing and rewarding one. For me, it feels like doing puzzles. Okay, so I'm chatting, but I need to fix something, so I'm going to see what it is. Too many lines here, not enough softness in the highlight, so I'm going to take this and add water, because it's sort of partly dry, and then I'm going to dab this away very gently, and it's going to leave some of my marks here, but it's also going to reveal some light of the paper, because I want to feel that there's a curl there, but I also want it to go into highlight. And then here where it curls back underneath, because this is still damp, I can just add some soft color and it will blend for me. And some lighter bits are coming over here, sort of soft curls. I'll leave this coming in front, so I'll just kind of bring this down here. I'm just sort of making this up as I go. It's not going to be perfect, but surprisingly, as a perfectionist, I'm not always going for perfect. As funny as that sounds. And I kind of just like try to imagine now shadows, and then into my highlights. Like, where are these little hairs going? How are they curling? Where are their volumes? Now she's starting to look like a cute little fairy. It took some time, but we're getting there. Just slowly building up these little curls and things. Guys, I know this is a bit of a long process, and I think sometimes we can get impatient with art and we want it to be done faster, but I think really the key to beautiful paintings is to just really relax into it. Sort of enjoy getting into the zone if you can. I spend most of my time in the zone, and I'm actually learning slowly to get into the zone while I'm filming and chatting. It's taken me a while. This is like a whole other learning curve, but it is getting there. I'm getting there, so that's really cool. I'm very happy about that. But yeah, just getting into the zone and sort of seeing it as like a beautiful meditation. This is my form of meditation. Oops, I want this all to curl up this way, actually. away from her shoulder here. So now there's too much contrast here, but I will go back and fix this. And all of these darker strokes do build up on the lighter strokes, and I do like to keep some of the lighter strokes in here as variation. It just adds visual interest. I was too dark, but I'm not going to panic. I'm actually just going to add a bit more yellow. Okay, it's starting to dry, so now I'm starting to panic, but I know that I can come back in right now with some more water and some of that yellow and soften that out. I'm really happy I spent so much time as a young artist analyzing and studying anatomy. I was very much a figurative painter earlier in my childhood, much to the confusion of older people who were like, why is this 12-year-old painting nudes all the time? But I was really wanting to follow in the footsteps of the old masters, and I had a lot of art history books from my dad from his university days doing his architecture degree. And so I was drawing mostly from, excuse me, from Michelangelo sculptures. I think everyone is banning the sculpture of David right now in the States. And yeah, he was a sculpture that I drew quite a bit at a very young age, and I can tell you I had the maturity for it. It was just an incredible learning situation for me. I wasn't looking at it as though it was nudity. I was looking at it through like science basically, and values and shapes and colors, and thinking back on it, I'm realizing I used to think I hated science because I was just so focused on art, but actually I was studying science while I was painting, essentially. There's a lot of parts of science that are in trying to mimic art, or have art mimic life. Alright, I'm going to bring some little hairs. This edge right now is very harsh. And I want some little hairs to fall over her arms, so I'm going to mix up some of this lighter color, nice and wet. And just do some lighter strands first. I don't want them too saturated. I need to add a little bit more Payne's gray in there. It's going to make a bit green, but that's okay. There's still some brown mixed. So here's the thing, it's like I'm superimposing this right now and it's not looking really great. So I'm going to have to come through with some darker colors and integrate these strands as though they're coming out of this hair. Oops. That flyaway is intense. Let's kind of break up this line a little bit. Alright, so now like I said, I need to merge these together. So I'm going to try to follow where I've already started sort of creating some random lines and things. Let's create some of these little flyaways. Gotta watch out for the saturation here. It's a bit saturated, which is the other reason why it's looking a little bit strange in this location. Add some more Payne's gray here. Usually flyaways happen sort of where these curls are changing direction. So I think I better darken into this area and soften it a little bit. And then this is now too dark for all of this bit, so I'm going to go from underneath this curl here and give some more shadow and saturation up into this area. Too much. Too much paint versus water. Okay, and then coming down here under these little leaves that I just placed, this needs to go a lot darker. So I just kind of edged out that line, and I'm just going to take some water and pull this out to dampen my paper. I can see exactly where my colors are going. And then I'm going to mix up some more color and let these sort of wash and create some shadows. And again, I think this little hair is curling under here. So I'm going to let that shadow upwards. And again, I'm just using a mix of colors. So there's like some moon glow in there, and there's some probably Payne's gray in there, and there's some burnt umber. All colors sort of in a desaturated sepia family, but I'm letting them sort of mix themselves on my paper here, and then also mix in with themselves on my painting. Alright, and you know what? I don't like to get overwhelmed, so I am going to stop for today. So this is a great paint sesh. I think we really advanced this very far, and I cannot wait to see you guys for the next session. Enjoy your day, and thanks so much for being here.